Okay, so what we're doing is each group is going to report out on their priorities. Just briefly introduce what topic that you covered, and then give us your top, 2 or 3 ideas, big ideas, solutions, whatever you happen to call them, to the particular problem on which you were working. And we will go first. We'll go back and forth. We'll start, Margot, with your group.
Okay, hello. We were Team Space. And since we're talking about makerspaces, space is kind of really critical, and we boiled it down to 3 areas. And what we're asking for is actually more or less the same thing for each of the 3 areas. We were concerned about the value proposition for having a space like this on your campus or at your institution. And what we really want the community to do is to share a succinct value proposition, NABC, for the space that they have existing, so we can see lots of models, and then we can write our own. Backing that up is we need to know more about logistics and operations. What is the space? How's it laid out? What's in there? How does the training work? All of that stuff. This is sort of a solved problem. This has happened at lots of makerspaces across the country, and many of them have written it up, but not everybody. So what we would like is there to be more examples of successful logistical aspects of makerspaces to be published, and then we'd like an easy way to find them, because searching for this is really difficult. Finally, we recognize that the space doesn't work unless it is supported by a culture. We recognize the culture is important, and we recognize the culture is also not something that you can import quite as easily as, for example, the value proposition. However, we think the best thing we need here is, again, examples of successful spaces and what those cultures are, how those work, how the collaborative community was developed at the student, faculty, and administrative level. And we'd also actually like to hear about things that have failed so we know what not to do.
Great, thank you. Panel, do you have any quick comments about those requests, those priorities?
So I think, to your point, Margot, and the broader team, the need to have openly and freely available resources around just the pure logistics and what it takes to actually build the space out, and all of the concerns. I know Ian had talked about everything from safety to how do you actually, get the equipment into the space, and how do you actually build the community around it is super important. So I know it's something that we've talked about too. Dale's talked a lot about too. But it's definitely something that I think crowdsourcing that across the Make Schools Alliance would be really, really important. And also, I don't know if there are some students here, but students are probably some of the best agents of being able to actually document what they've been doing in their spaces and to generate that. And so one idea might be to somehow figure out, can you actually make that part of a course where, that is, I'm not saying it's an assignment because that would make it boring, but could that be actually something that students do as part of their program or curriculum if they are in fact working in the space on a project?
Great, and Dale?
No, I think the spirit of collaboration and trying to solve these problems together is a good thing. I think the only other thing, I'm just looking at Ian, but the fact that you get a space going, that's a value proposition of itself, right? Is like, get the space going, get people using it, demonstrate the value of what you're talking about, and then find words for that to back it up. But I don't think the words leading the way necessarily deliver the goods at the end.
Okay, well, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay,
Just keep talking.
I guess my comment is that NSF is waiting for a proposal from Dale or from Make School Alliance or somebody to share information about resources, like if there's some information about what are the fundamentals for a makerspace in this in a university context or a library or whatever.
Yeah.
But
I just to add thing. I mean, I think it'd be interesting to construct a survey if you haven't. I don't know if Make Schools has thought of that, but and just every what a certain period of time, every once a year or something, you're going to ask questions about places and then aggregate that information.
I mean, if somebody could develop the online forum for that where people can contribute what they have to share.
Yeah, I think considering what would you like to know about other people's spaces would be really good. Number of students, and I'm really interested. Ian's had this idea a while ago, and I really think in the magazine we'd be interested in publishing, like, I don't know, for being publisher here, but America's top universities makerspaces, that kind of thing, and what makes them good? What makes them? It isn't just the most square footage or the most machines. What makes them vital to the campus and what kind of support they're getting, and be able to put that out there.
Great. All right, this side of the room. What group? Announce what group you're into.
Yeah, it's the K-12, which I think Tom Khalil did a great job of teeing up as something that needs sincere and deep focus. We did change one word from pipeline to pathway, because we're talking about kids, not oil. But in that pathway, there is this bridge that needs to happen between K-12 and university, and there's parts that the universities can play on both sides of that. But we looked at, we said that first needs to be awareness, then interest, skill development, and then what workforce readiness leading up to that bridge, and then the other side of it, workforce development, job placement, career. And we identified a whole bunch of things that we felt like needed to be focused on. But the first one is this idea of access, which has already been talked about a little bit with the spaces, but we need lots of spaces where youth already are. And it's not sort of creating brand new spaces, it's looking at spaces that already exist, whether it's rec centers, libraries, schools, and say, what can they do to integrate more of this in those spaces, and looking in ways to invest in people. It's far more about people thinking in a maker mindset than it is about sort of equipment. Equipment is needed, but think about the people and what they can do with even found and upcycled and that sort of thing. So really investing in a mindset and investing to support those people so they don't have to fight every battle, that if they have to fight the battle to both justify what they're doing and pay for it out of pocket and all these different pieces, they're going to get consumed in that fight. So we need some way, some mechanism to invest in that, whether it's like a Sprout fund that does lots of these micro catalytic investments, or some other entity that gets a larger grant to then redistribute to lots of people, or professional development, or these other types of things, which actually brings me to sort of the next one, which is the content approach in professional development. How are we investing in those people? What are we doing? There's lots of fear, there's lots of set routines, there's lots of limited time, all these different problems. But guess what? We have some amazing resources. We have youth. And youth as reverse mentors, actually helping solve the problems and sort of, helping educators to feel like you can pull back the curtain. You don't need to be the expert in everything. In fact, you shouldn't be. You should be the expert in process. And you should open up to say, let's learn this together, and I can help you learn how to learn. But we need cohorts and communities like what's done at Soulcraft or other places to really bring teachers together to say, you're first a learner. If you haven't learned anything in a while, let's actually really kind of go through that process, because there's so much new stuff, and transparency and sharing out. And then the last thing we talked about was this idea of networking. How do teachers connect with each other? If we're talking about K-12 and universities working together, where are the points for them to talk to each other? And to come up with new ideas. We can't predict or prescribe everything that's going to happen, but if we set up an environment in which there's regular, whether it's meetups, or whether it's the social media community, or whether it's ways to find coalitions, and to celebrate the unsung heroes. How can you find those people? And then when those in positions of power sort of, are like, oh, this person's been here all this time and somebody else is telling me how great my own principal is. That sort of is sort of a little bit embarrassing, right? But embarrassing in the right way to say, like, look how great you are, and you didn't even know it. And we need to do more and more of that celebration. So, if Case Western Reserve University is saying to Cleveland School District, here, look at this amazing setup you have, hopefully that inspires more and elevates more. But we need that happening all over the place, and the universities and K-12 need to find ways to really talk to each other regularly in a really committed way.
Great, thank you. Any quick comments from the panel?
I was about to say that I think quickly that I think that the sort of the idea that universities could help with creating equity in this space would be really important to think about. And I think you touched upon that, so I won't elaborate. But just the idea that as much as there is a lot happening in K through 12, there are a lot of communities. I'm thinking of the tribal communities, rural areas of the U.S. where there isn't necessarily the advocate or champion or ambassador, but universities could play that role.
Okay, great. Any other comments or on to the next?
Just the big, the transition from high school to undergraduate education is a big problem, especially for underrepresented minorities. And so universities can do something there by developing projects to get those students involved in makerspaces so that the transition to a higher ed institution isn't such a challenge.
All right.
Yeah, just a quick thing. I really like the idea of students working in maker spaces across the community, sharing what they know. We did a model of that with Maker Core during the summer, working in community centers and science centers. And I think your students are really, potentially terrific mentors. They've just learned this. They're excited to share it. And figuring out how to make that more accessible to like a teacher or someone to tap into is one of the problems.
All right, great. Next group over here.
Looking at the problem of getting making into the curricula, we basically narrowed it down to 3 areas we were going to focus on as problems and solutions. So we have the problems of incorporating hands-on project-based learning with STEM, the problem of engineering design interaction, and our last problem, showing that project-based learning works in these areas and the incorporation of making actually functions. So I'm going to let our team come up and just give you a brief solution to each of those problems.
So one solution we had is to have students selected maker projects, so self-selected, personally relevant maker projects in traditional STEM engineering courses. And there would be a negotiation between the student and the professor that this project has to be based on the course content. And once that's approved, the student would work on that project and achieve learning based on something that they care about and making something they care about. And some ideas we had was involving undergraduate TAs to handle some of the large grading requirements, and it would require a resource like a makerspace.
Great.
The problem we dealt with was how do you have an effective product or made item without a collaboration between engineering and design. That collaboration can take place either between departments within the same institution or between institutions. And that what's really important is for the in-place faculty in this collaboration to, in addition to theory, to bring actual skills, and if possible, to bring some relevant field experience to the collaboration. It's also important to have access to support professionals, either people from the field, volunteers who can provide guidance and can also foster an atmosphere of respect between the various faculty members that come from the engineering side and from the design side. It's very important to foster an atmosphere of buy-in between the engineering side and the design arts side, and also to have buy-in between faculty and administration. And it's also important to establish a principle that the product that is produced from this making experience is repeatable, is mass producible, and is economical. What we're essentially talking about is maybe adding an A to STEM so that it becomes STEAM. So that what we have is we have design as an absolutely essential element to the making and this process.
Great.
So how do you replace the traditional lecture lab with an experiential maker kind of learning? Start with a freshman course. So let's pick electrical engineering freshman introduction. Find risk-taking faculty, split that section into half, where half will go the traditional route that they've been, that your university's been doing electrical engineering for the past decade. The other half will have it divided into, say, 4 projects, teaching the same elements, integrated over to that class, but doing it through 4 projects. Give that risk-taking faculty some release time to build it over the summer and the makerspace in order to do the work, open lab instead of a lecture lab course, and then assess the skills using the same midterm and final exam, but then also add a behavioral type assessment to it. How much retention is there?
Great, thank you. Comments from the panel?
Go on. I mean, they sound interesting. I think the thing that, they kind of echo but don't say is giving students more control, more choice, and we have this term maker-centered learning that I think is coming up, and I think I was talking to one of the students here that I really enjoy getting to know, and increasingly they feel like they should be able to determine what they do, and schools should support that. Not just tell them what they think what the school thinks they should do.
Okay, then the group over here on the left.
Hi, so we had assessment as large, and everyone cares about assessment, right? Because what gets measured gets done. So we should all care about assessment, right? So one of the first ideas that we had overall was, again, this notion that rubrics are a part of feedback overall, but not the only part of feedback that we should be giving to our makers. But they are really helpful for providing baselines, for helping make decisions, and for being able to generate sources of supporting data for the kind of work that we care about. But again, the important thing is that if we want to have accurate assessments, they really should be tied to credits or reward structures. It shouldn't be something outside that. We need to have that tie. And they should translate, basically, if they've done well in this assessment, they should be able to be a good college student. If they've done good in their assessment at a college student, that should translate to their abilities to do well in a workplace. Now, some actual items to go off of this with some of the assessments. Dale, wouldn't it be awesome if we had actually some of these assessments occurring actually at the maker fairs? Having, of course, maker fairs should always be an open, broad community, but wouldn't that be a great way to get more students even into that community to show off their kind of work, because they recognize that I have skin in the game in this as well. It's going to help me to get to college, better job, what have you. So we could have even the communities as a whole help with being at maker fairs. Also, opportunity to develop communication skills, and people could also see what goes into really good making. Have some great example projects come out of that. So then, as a third idea, and this one's maybe going more towards NSF on this one, wouldn't it be great if we were able to post existing assessment strategies and rubrics on a website like makeschools.org and actually had the funding to support that, so that we could basically comment on those. But the idea is that we will be looking for strategies that actually went also beyond ABET, not just ones that target ABET, but go beyond that. Maybe even looking at existing outside assessment strategies that are done for, let's say, executive programs for colleges. What even was done all the way back during Tech Shop. People talk about the Tech Shop. How was that assessment done for it? But being able to have that kind of collection, that conversation around it in order to inform the assessment work as a whole. Those are ideas. Thank you.
Comments? You were called out specifically, Dale and NSF.
Come on, Dale. Well, Dave, I probably don't feel as strongly about this assessment as you do, because I see a lot of making having its own feedback loop and its own form of self-assessment, that I think that's what's right about it. How that translates out into the world is kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
How do other people evaluate you? And I thought one of the presentations might have been yours that was talking about how, in some ways, if someone assesses you here and you go to another university, could that assessment or a portfolio thing go with you? I think that's really interesting, of more peer forms of assessment.
Yes.
When someone looks at a project and says, notices the craftsmanship or skill involved in doing that, I think that's really interesting. I'm less interested in the credential or other kind of elements of that, but that's where I am.
Yeah, so as a community builder still. Yeah, it's great.
I want to ask another question. This came more from the student, a student interaction, and that was getting equivalency, an assessment so you get equivalency of what you might do in the classroom with the lecture and the traditional task, because this student leaned toward making and being very experiential and said that sometimes it's discouraging because it's really not recognized by the university and I don't get any credit.
Yeah.
So that's a little different twist on assessment and why you might want to open it up a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's a valid point. I mean, one of the things we see in formal and informal learning is, there's little recognition of, kid does a robotics class and there's a star in that, but it's outside of school and the school doesn't recognize it, never ends up. So I think to some degree, the more important thing is the recognition of it and recognition of the students' talents and abilities. How we do that, I think, is open. But I don't think necessarily the grade they got there necessarily translates over here as the answer.
I also.
Do you have a few? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to piggyback off of the discussion and just say that I think there's also a real inherent value to seeing how different institutions are recognizing the value of supplemental alternative modes of assessment, case in point, maker portfolios or things like digital badging. The president, specifically articulated earlier this week that standardized testing is taking some, if not a lot of the joy out of learning and making it really difficult for both teachers and students to really embrace education in a way that I think we hope that students and teachers have an opportunity to do in the classroom. And so I think just the fact that different educational institutions are experimenting, in the sort of in line with the maker ethos of experimenting with alternative modes of assessment that are, not in place of necessarily standardized testing, but are complementary and actually get to the non-cognitive factors. Things like grit and perseverance and creative confidence, I think, are really important.
Yeah, well, this is my personal take, not NSF official, but to the degree that sometimes you do need to produce some numbers or some data like that for certain purposes, but to the degree that the assessment can be based, you might say, in the process and in the product itself. So it's not like you don't stick a thermometer in and take the temperature and say, oh, that's 80% and this is 90%. But if it's inherent in, if they built this, then they know how to do certain things, or the process, or by some measure you could say this process, really helped develop certain skills, And the lingo is embedded assessment, so that you don't have to make the student do anything else to prove something. They just do something, and then through that activity, you can figure out, the outcome or the effect of that.
Great. All right, we'll go to the next group. But
Thank
Dale,
you.
I do want to let you know that it's 4 in case you do need to take off. So, okay, Ian.
Just before I begin, I do a lot of karaoke, and every time I step up to one of these microphones, I'm looking around for the prompter with the lyrics on it.
Do you want to serenade us?
So I would love to. Do you have 10 minutes? But if I do launch into Faith by George Michaels, I'm going to ask Barry to tap me on the shoulder. Our topic was training, and what we found was that there is a great disparity in the solutions that we have at our different institutions, both in higher education, in 9 through 12, K through 12, and in companies. It's not yet like a library or a gym. Makerspaces are somewhat like gyms or libraries in that they're a new entity on campus. Like a gym or a library, there's going to be rules, like how you access it and what the hours are and what the different staff are called, but there's not that vocabulary yet. If you go to a library, that's called the checkout desk. If you go to a gymnasium, that's called the issue room, or the whatever they may call it, issue desk, where you go get your basketballs and your hockey sticks and things like that. There's not yet that vocabulary that is the same at every institution, even what we call our student workers, innovation experts, dream coaches, etc. So it's not yet a standard, and I'm curious to see where that's going to go. We had our first major topic was different access levels. It's very good to think about compartmentalizing the machines in your shop. If you have a pencil, that probably requires a lot less training than the lathe. If you have a laser cutter, that's somewhere in the middle. I know Marty here at MIT, they have 3 different access levels. We split things up into 5. I've seen every number under the sun. There's not yet a standard model. Even with regards to staffing, We had at the table representatives from shops or from makerspaces that had 1 staff member, as well as 35 staff members. I think the 35 is the right answer, but there's clearly no standard model yet. Regards to safety, this was one area where there is a compliance organization we can look to for guidance. OSHA, I remember complaining about OSHA as a student and loving them now as a staff member. OSHA publishes an amazing website in very plain English on the rules for guarding various machines, and we now have that to rely on, in addition to the legal and risk management folks within our institutes. So implementing an articulated framework for safety we found to be very important. It's a bad habit to get into, to just do this and do that and do this other thing without an articulated framework of why you're doing it or how these all interlock. The next big topic we tackled was design. It's not just enough to teach someone how to use a machine. You have to teach them that a 1-inch peg doesn't fit in a 1-inch hole. You need clearance. Or you have to teach them about everything under the sun. Design. So there were a couple different solutions to this. There's universities, especially art-focused universities, that teach many courses on design. Some institutions that are more engineering-focused will teach courses on design, so that it's at the faculty level. There's other areas where they've hired individual staff to be experts in various areas of design, and these are staff that the students can then approach. These are staff who live within the makerspace. There's also, if you have less staffing than that, there's the idea to generate the culture within your students, that they can rely upon each other for design advice, so that you can, through that network of students, increase the throughput that you would otherwise have available with just a few staff members. So all of these things are great topics for a social scientist or someone who researches education to tackle. It's pretty clear that there's not yet a standard accepted model or curriculum for making or for makerspaces in K through 12 or in higher education. For a curriculum, we would clearly rely on ABET, but I don't think ABET is going to tackle making or makerspaces in the near future. So I'm very curious to see what this discussion is going to sound like in the next 3 or 5 or 10 years. And I think we're all going to be there to see it happen.
Thank you. Comments?
I just say that I think safety is all in our interest to solve together. It's the least sexy, but perhaps the most important thing you could do together. I can only imagine, that a couple incidents could really turn the tide against us here. Yeah. And I don't think it's going to be okay to just say, well, we had our safety manual. I think you're going to have to say, like an industry would, we followed the best practices in our industry, and still we failed, So I think this is something I think that's urgent, and it isn't just having the documentation, it is the procedure, it's the monitoring, it's reporting, and all of that. If you could imagine that there's a sort of a center for this that allows you to get better at this over time. It isn't just something you do and you're done with, but it actually allows it to evolve. And so I'd say that the thing is, if you're all going to go off and do your own safety manuals, don't. Try to do it together somehow, borrow from other people, and kind of find ways to collate what you're doing.
I think, too, as much as we're talking about younger makers, I think there's a real inherent role that that parents can play in the conversation around safety. I know we tend to talk about sort of like the regulations aspect of it, but to the extent that there are much younger makers where they are, still living at home and whatnot, that there's a role that parents can play in the conversation.
On the MIT map, there's a reason there are all the red spaces there, because they don't want people to either hurt themselves or hurt the machines. So it's kind of our obligation to figure out how to solve this problem well. And we're getting people that have a lot less experience doing this. We want them, but some people said in some of the talks the other day, is like they don't always know what a screwdriver is, let alone a CNC machine. So we have to solve for them as well.
Yeah, and it's important. I've been a director of a couple science museums, and there have been some real serious incidents, especially in some newer science museums where, well, I can remember one incident where somebody got killed, but also, severe injuries just because the exhibits weren't poorly designed. They were poorly designed and didn't take into account some fundamental safety features.
Okay, great. Next set of solutions.
Oh, yes. So we talk about the industry, what work should the industry do to help the maker movement, and also what the challenges and the needs. So basically, what we talk about was that schools should really, make it mandatory, kind of. So, and then kids would be, forced to take some classes, and that can help them. So community colleges and also universities. But also we discuss about the fact that, we don't really need to force them, but also what we can do, we can offer some opportunities, like, businesses also should be involved, offering internship, paid internship, so that can also help some students and to go and to, to be involved really in the maker movement. We also talk about not only schools and not only businesses, but we talk also about, developing tools and like kits to help kids also to be interested into that, and so they can have easy access to the tools and develop, and be able also to make some product, and also mentorship, so we can kind of help them to get access to mentors that can, foster them or help them out so they can have like a great exposure and learn fast. We talk about it, and we also talk about how to create an environment that can help kids or some talents to be found, and so that they can have a great exposure, and also, and we talk about creating a model that can help them produce and the tools, or like create the things that they want to create, and also that it can be commercialized, so they can benefit from it. So yes.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Industry engagement.
So I was part of the discussion of this group, and thank you so much for presenting. So I was part of this group, and I think one of the really interesting things we talked about was how industry, whether that's a small local business or a national company, they're beginning to realize that there's real inherent value in identifying students that wouldn't otherwise on a regular paper resume, similar to the maker portfolio idea, right? That actually seeing and understanding what students are doing in spaces or what they're creating at home is actually a great opportunity to identify and recruit really talented students, for their companies. And we had a couple of folks who are part of various companies who were saying that a lot of times, the way that they were doing this was by talking to students who would bring like an example of their capstone project independently on a interview. But I think there's like something to be said for, could a portfolio system, the maker portfolio system can also translate further beyond, college or higher ed admission to, getting a job, right? So that's another inherent value. It was interesting.
Great. Any other comments? All right. There's a group over here on this side, I think. No? Did we get everybody? Do we just have Dara left? Yeah, there was a combination of groups. We have one left. Yes, yeah. Dara.
So we had any other business conveniently left till last. So we covered a lot of ground and a lot of different kind of topical areas. I don't know how far we got into solutions, but we covered a lot of kind of challenges and ideas. We started with kind of a big kind of group share on what we see as the other problems that weren't captured by the group. The ideas of kind of fitting, particularly from different types of institutions, feeling like they belong within the maker movement as well as different departments. So do art and design programs, for example, feel like they can belong within the territory of making, and defining value propositions for those groups so they can understand what this is and how they belong, and also combating the kind of not just for geeks idea behind it. The ideas of being interdisciplinary and how to bring students together in this way across the institution came up, helping entrepreneurship innovation through inspiration and trying to find kind of examples that elevate makers, considering kind of a broader idea of community engagement to extend to alumni as well. The idea of potential tensions between grassroots efforts and governance, so avoiding top-down structures. And what we settled on as kind of the 2 points for discussion for our group was this idea of creating a diverse ecosystem as well as this idea of governance. Governance we maybe made a little less ground on, but so I'll start there. So the idea of transparency in the university and beyond around governance was seen as kind of key. Having amazing leadership is great, but we also don't want to move too fast to define what this is, could be, or put too many structures around it so it becomes highly rigorous. So avoiding that top-down approach and allowing kind of making to blossom as a grassroots effort is something that we saw as really important. One potential way or two potential solutions to this is defining the mission so that it doesn't incorporate kind of governance or avoids that with a clear statement, and also flipping the system so that the people who potentially might try and implement governance or structures actually get on the ground and see why that will be a bad thing to do, or maybe not the most ideal in this context. We spent probably more time on the idea of this expanded kind of ecosystem. So how do we kind of break down some of the silos within the institutions and kind of cross those politics or turf wars that happen around spaces, and particularly how they get politicized by being owned by one or two departments. And one kind of potential opportunity was seen as kind of leveraging this liminal moment in higher ed, where everyone's kind of gravitating to the maker movement as a way to kind of bring people together and look at combined approaches which are successful in collecting stories to highlight why we might want to avoid these kind of disciplinary structures, silos, or politics. Lobbying was also seen as a really important part here to create advocacy around why we want to break down some of those boundaries that might exist within institutions, removing labels, getting kind of a clearer kind of vocabulary so that other disciplines can be included. And the vocabulary was seen as a big kind of a barrier to potential different areas understanding what making is and how it will be valuable to them, as well as how they could contribute within it. Or kind of an alternative is to kind of reach out, try and get everyone involved, take those who will get involved and ignore the rest, and hopefully you've got a good set of, good set of collaborators. So a lot of different potential solutions, but language was seen as a barrier, and so was the politics around departments. And we don't have any perfect solutions, but we have some ideas to start. So that's where we got to.
Great, thank you. Any comments?
Sorry.
Okay. No, I have an idea. So one of the things that we try to do too with the work that I've been doing at the White House is to try as much as possible to highlight and tell the stories of makers themselves, right? And to paint the picture. And you'd mentioned the diverse ecosystem and diversity being a key aspect, and that's something that's a priority for us too, is realizing that making is something that is really inclusive. Nobody tells you you're not a maker, you self-identify. And so finding the sort of spectrum of people from all different backgrounds and ethnicity and races and parts of the country, and then telling those stories. But I think specific to the higher ed space, one way that I was thinking could help with breaking down some of the barriers or silos between departments is the way that you can tell the stories of your students that are cross-collaborating with one another, or equally celebrating the things that get created by the electrical engineering or mechanical engineering students, as the biomedical students, as the as the English students that are using the spaces. So I mean, I think it's a soft way of doing it, but I think it's a way that has a real impact because people make personal connections to stories.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, so we've just heard a bunch of solutions to some problems that we're all faced with. What we'd like you to do right now is to pull out those white index cards, note cards, where you wrote on one side some of the biggest problems that you're dealing with in terms of really pushing a maker culture, a maker system within your campuses and within your communities, but particularly your campuses. Now what we would like you to do is to turn those cards over and commit to one of the solutions that perhaps spurred an idea in your mind or that was intriguing to you. Write that solution down on the back of that card with the thought that you'll commit to trying to solve or to put that solution in action on your campus by the next week of making. And what we would like to do, and Dara's going to talk a little bit about this too, but I'm going to add something to this. When we see what you've written down, and we see which of you are wanting to, say, work on the training piece to standardize that, we will connect you so that as you're not working on it by yourself, you're working on it as a group to kind of forward that piece, to put that piece forward. So you're going to write this down, and you're going to take a picture of it so that you keep it, because we want the cards. But you probably should take a picture of it so you know what you've committed to. And I'm going to pass it over to Dara to kind of finish that piece up.
So in getting you all here today, we kind of realized talking about some of these problems and challenges and ideas is really just a starting point. And what we've done for the afternoon is really germinate the idea or the seed of community-minded solutions. And our big audacious goal in running up to the next week of making is how we turn commitment into action, as we mentioned kind of earlier today. And that's exactly what we want to do now. If we have every institution in this room commit to one solvable solution, and it can be small, it can make sense for your institution. It could be collating some resources, sharing a curricula, sharing a series of talks, or organizing an event that everyone else could attend, to much more audacious plans like putting a framework for training together or helping to build technology solutions that everyone can use. So over the next 9 months, what we want to do is work with everyone in this room, and instead of committing next summer to making, actually provide tangible benefits back out to our community. If we all work on solvable resources or solutions that we can all benefit from, we can really elevate making on our campuses for whatever makes sense for us, be it teaching, innovation, or research. If we figure out what's most valuable to us and how it translates into the community as a whole and then contribute back, we can galvanize as a community to really advance rapidly by next summer. And that's our goal. That was our kind of big intention behind bringing everyone together to get a game plan for the next week of making. Over the next week, what we're going to do is we're going to share kind of a contact list and get everyone together. We're going to synthesize all the kind of the ideas that have been germinating and percolating out here so that you can go back to your institutions, talk to them and see what makes sense. But we want to get kind of a line in the sand and see what you guys are interested in contributing back. That's why we've given you the index cards to start to think about who makes sense to work with who, or if you want to work independently, that's perfectly great too. But we want to organize as a community around solutions as we kind of prepare for the next week of making, and that's the goal. So we're going to share a lot of information based on today. We're going to get everyone together online and have a conference call in about a month once we've synthesized everything out, prepared a report, and got your input on what it is that you want to turn into action. So we're hoping that you'll pin yourself to something today before you leave. Go back to your institution and talk to them about what you could do as an institution for the community, and get back in touch with us in a couple of weeks and let us know how we can all work together to solve these challenges that we've all identified. So we'll give you some time to write and digest that, and we'll be kind of around. Find myself, Lisa, or one of the volunteers if you do have your card filled out, and make sure that your name and institution is on there as well.
And I just wanted to also just add to what Lisa and Dara said, that the president cares really deeply about this, and so he's really, just on behalf of the White House, thank you so much for taking the time to work on this. I think all our communities and all of our students need it. And to the extent that I can be helpful as you are working on your idea and bringing together a bit of a tiger team that maybe will work with you on your idea in your community, please feel free to reach out to me. I think both Dara and Lisa have my contact information, but if there's something that we can do on our end to help, I genuinely mean it when I say please, send us an email or reach out to me in some way. And then All of that to say too, before we go, I just wanted to say a big thank you to sort of the lead team around the Make Schools Alliance. So Dara, Lisa, Dave, I'm like, you're all spread out. Margot, Aubrey, and anybody else that I may have missed? Yeah, there's obviously many others that aren't here, but just a huge thank you for putting this together.
Absolutely, thank
And
you.
keeping the community alive.
Thank you. Did you want to say something? Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like you to help me make my job easier by sending in good ideas so that it's easier for me to be a part of the process of awarding grants. So, I can talk to Lisa to see if there's a way in which, I can have an online forum or a conference call or whatever if there are some concepts that you think might work with NSF, and I can discuss those with you, and then maybe I can try to link you with, I might be able to help out in some small areas, but at least I can help link you to the right place to talk to. So that's what NSF is there for, is to fund great ideas. So, and we're counting on you to come up with those ideas.
Great, thank you. And so with that, our 3 days of innovation and innovating and thinking and connecting has come to a conclusion. And thank you so much for traveling to Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. Have a great rest of the week.